Well, folks, how do you do? It's time yet again to talk about the banjo. Talk about the banjo, ask questions about the banjo, and who better to talk about the banjo and ask questions about the banjo to than two of the people that I've learned to play the banjo from. I'll introduce them one at a time. I started doing this introduction just now before I realized what that would entail. And so devoid of any real interesting facts about these people's lives, I will just say that you've probably seen their videos on YouTube already. So it is now time to introduce, for your viewing pleasure, Mr. Jim Pankey and Jody Hughes.
Hey, y'all.
It all happened at one time. You can tell how professional this is, can't you? Now, wait a minute, Jim. I think you're in the.
This is auto harp. It's the auto harp chat, right?
That's down the hall. No, you're in the wrong classroom, man.
Dang it! I do that every time.
First day of school is tough. I know.
Too many strings there.
Yeah.
I don't have it. I don't have the slightest idea. Too many strings.
So before we get started, I just want to, on the outset, everyone let me know if we've got problems with the stream or if you're having a hard time hearing anybody. We'll do what we can to fix that. But just feel free to let us know. If you don't like what we're saying, that's kind of a separate issue, but we can try and deal with that as well. But yeah, I'd like to welcome Jody and Jim to this to my YouTube channel. Welcome. Have a look around. Get comfortable. I think we're kind of going to do what we did last time, which is talk about the banjo and ask a lot of questions if we can. Sorry, give me 1 second here. But if we can answer a bunch of questions about the banjo, that would be awesome. But I've got my own questions for both of you first, so I'm first in line.
I didn't know there was going to be questions.
Oh boy!
yeah.
Of course, I also thought it was auto harp chat. So
yeah, exactly. Okay, so nothing too intense or crazy, but I think the last time we did this, I think we had to plan how to do it based on our different and busy schedules, which involved spending time in places that aren't, our own home, because that's what life was like at that time. So I'm kind of curious, what's everyone's banjo life looking like these days? How do you guys spend your days musically?
Well, I've been playing the auto harp quite a bit.
It all comes back.
I've fortunately, like most of us, what few gigs we had kind of dried up and went away. So I did step up the YouTube game just a little bit, created some more content, did some of that, but not really a whole lot, because the way I kind of work is, here's an idea, I'll do that. But, I don't have a schedule. But yeah, and not only did my gigs dry up, all my private lessons did as well. So I don't have people coming to me for lessons right now, and so that's kind of different too. And so yeah, my days are spent right here, just picking the auto harp and playing the banjo a little.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it. But I've heard both of you guys have had gigs recently. What's up with that?
Yeah, I ended up having it. Yeah, Jody, you just had a gig yesterday, was it?
Yeah, I had a gig yesterday. That's my first gig since all the COVID stuff. So yeah, it was great. I forgot how much I missed it.
Was it a live audience or was it live streamed?
No, it was actually at a resort here in Rome, Georgia, at Barnsley Gardens. Jim probably knows where that's at. Yeah, and it was just for a July the 4th dinner.
Was that with Chuck or was that somebody else?
No, it was with some other friends. It was just a trio, and people came and ate dinner really far apart.
Yeah,
and we played Bluegrass. So yeah, it was great having that feeling again, I must say.
Yeah, that is so cool. That is I did one that was live streamed, and yeah, no audience, but just the idea of playing with people again. That's something to get used to.
Yeah,
right.
I was worried about what the timing of everyone was going to feel like. We've all been sitting around playing by ourselves.
Yeah. I have a hard enough
It's going
time
to be
with that
loose
already.
for a while. I have
Yeah, exactly. Cool. Well, let's get into what the people are here for. Let's give them all the mysterious, esoteric banjo wisdom, everything we know about 3 chords and 5 strings,
and the truth.
and the truth, and the truth will also be included in addition to those things.
See, there we go. See, I didn't know it was not auto harp. Now we're going to talk about the truth. So
it's it's a fast-paced lesson that we're working through here, but we'll get you some. Stay behind, and I'll give you some extra help with the truth part.
Good.
let's see what. Okay, I gotta backtrack and find questions. Oh, another thing. How long can I stall, do you think, before we actually answer a question? If you check out the links in the description of this video, I think I've set it up that if you click on those links, it will automatically subscribe you to whichever channel you click on. I know.
Click
I didn't even
all
know.
of those.
You click them real fast.
I subscribe to myself.
Yeah, find out. Yeah. So everybody here, there's 82 people here. I assume that some of you people are not subscribed to Jody Hughes or Jim Pankey. If you just go click on that link right there, you're doing a world of good for these guys.
Yes, thank you.
Of course, you're also on a page where you can see a little button, a little red button that says subscribe. That actually subscribes to my YouTube channel. So if that should also be interesting to you, then you could also click on that. I'm just saying, but definitely take a look down there and subscribe to Jody and Jim, because they're both putting out a ton of content that is super helpful. So, okay, let's do it. Let's do it this time. Let's see. Oh, this is a kind of interesting thing. So Jim says, would to have less boring right hand, more syncopation. I assume that means how to have less boring right hand. So I'm going to kind of clarify that question, I think. What I think is being asked here is, like, what is it about the banjo players that we listen to that makes their right hand playing so interesting, right? Because we can all play the right notes in the right order, but they're not always, it doesn't always sound as exciting as when J.D. Crowe plays it, or Earl Scruggs plays it, or whoever plays it. So what do you guys think about things like syncopation or emphasizing different notes, or whatever you think about with your right hand stuff?
Yeah, I kind of think all of the above. Definitely syncopation. And one of the things, the simple thing with syncopation is, trying to understand what we're going to syncopate. Are we going to syncopate the rhythm, or are we going to move the melody to other notes? A great example of that, just recently, Jody posted Battle Hymn of the Republic. And if you go and listen to his video of that, listen to the second break and listen to where he puts the melody. He moves the melody. It's like an eighth note from where the normally the melody that you would sing comes. So that type of syncopation is, so that's not so much, well, it's partly right hand, but as far as just the right hand goes, just learning to swing some of the notes, not all of them. And then obviously emphasizing certain notes. And there's a ton of stuff that Jim Mills does that you hear him play, and there'd be like this one note, and he's playing along, and there's this one note that's there. It's like, what was that?
Yeah.
And it's like, man, that was still just an alternating roll, but he pounded that third note, Yeah. So that sort of stuff is stuff that I aspire to do. I don't always succeed, but when I go back and listen to stuff I've recorded and the things I'm proud of, it's those moments that I was able to either move the melody somewhere a little different or really emphasize certain notes in those licks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's interesting you bring up Jim Mills, the way he emphasizes stuff. When I think about people like Jim Mills or J.D. Crowe, especially J.D. Crowe, I guess, if you listen to the Bluegrass album band stuff that Crowe did, a lot of those breaks are pretty close note for note for what Earl played on some of the original stuff. Yeah. It pretty much, but it's interesting because if you don't really pay attention, you might not actually notice that because of the way that he emphasizes certain notes. He might play the same licks or the same patterns, but all he has to do is just emphasize different notes. So something that is probably worth doing is just go listen to people do things that Earl did, and listen to the ways that they do it different. Listen to the things that they don't get right, that's what's cool about their playing. You know, the things that they're trying to copy Earl and it doesn't quite come out like Earl. That's the cool thing that you can take from them, you know?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I would say a lot of it to me goes back to just, I think the thing that helps me is just hearing the tune really well in my head. You know, I'm almost trying to phrase it like a singer would sing it, you know, whereas, you know, sometimes I'm not always going to be right on that downbeat. I might be a little bit off because of the way I would just kind of sing it or take a breath or something. So I think that's what's kind of going in my own head most of the time when I'm not being analytical about it. But a lot of it's just like emphasizing the strings. And I know from my own influence, like Alan Shelton in particular, he would emphasize that first string and that middle string. And Jim Mills does that a lot. And I think that got its way into my own playing. And that's a big part of sometimes that syncopation is that emphasis of that first string, you know, just kind of popping it a little bit more. Of course, it doesn't have to be the first string. One person who I've been kind of studying with one of my students recently, and it's kind of funny because he's a big influence, but I just never sat down and like learned his exact accenting, is Bill Emerson. And he kind of eludes me a little bit because it's not as predictable in some ways where he's throwing those accents. So he's kind of an interesting one for me. But I really like his playing too with the syncopation. Definitely. Yeah. Bill Emerson is so fascinating because, you know, depending on when you listen to him, you know, I know a lot of his own records, it's this really interesting combination of, you know, like Don Reno and Alan Shelton and Earl Scruggs in this way that you I don't notice it as much with the Country Gentleman or on Tony Rice Plays and Sings Bluegrass, but then you listen to his albums and it's like he's got a whole different language almost. It's pretty fascinating. All right, let's get into another thing here. Let's see. Do you know any licks or songs for banjo that are sad or in a minor key that you recommend learning? Do we have any sad minor songs worth learning? I think Lonesome Moonlight Waltz is a good one. People don't play it on the banjo that much, but it's a melancholy one.
The first minor tune I ever learned was Greensleeves.
Greensleeve, yeah, okay, yeah.
You know,
totally.
Yeah, I was probably 14. I'm going, hey, wait, I can play Greensleeves. It's like,
yeah, totally, yeah. I think I mean, there's a lot of fiddle tunes out there. That's probably what fiddle tunes or melodies like that. It's interesting. There's not a lot of banjo tunes written in minor keys that often, you know.
Yeah, and some
Nashville
of it
blues.
Some of it's, you know, some of it's like, you know, I don't know if it's sad or not, but like you could get like, you know, anything in a minor key could have that feeling. I mean, you could have like something like Wayfaring Stranger, you know, it's not necessarily sad, but at the same time you could.
Yeah.
You know, it's so I don't know. I don't have.
Yeah. I mean, and if you're looking for sad, they're not always in minor keys, but if you go to the Stanley Brothers or really all kinds of Ralph Stanley, there's plenty of sad music out there to be sung in bluegrass, you know.
Some very sad, pitiful music. For sure.
Absolutely. Pitiful is a good word.
Graveyard music.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. Here's one from somebody I've never heard of, and I don't know if you guys know this guy. Jim, when are you starting your auto harp lessons?
Russ, I got you, man. I'll make an exception for you, and we'll even do video lessons. I can teach you the auto harp.
For anyone who doesn't know, 81 Crow is Russ Carson, banjo player with Rocky Scruggs in the Tennessee Lightning Band.
Yes.
And so you're gonna want to check that. No, Ricky Skaggs and Kentucky Thunder. So check him out. You probably already know about him too. How could you not? Here's one.
Why don't they know about him, right?
Yeah. Look, we're doing our homework. We're trying to answer. Why don't you guys study a little bit and figure out who Russ Carson is? That's probably a good tactic, is for me to start insulting the audience. Is that probably a good idea?
Right,
yeah. You're welcome, folks. Only here. I bet you didn't think that's what you were getting into. Okay. Oh, here's one that I saw Jody had his banjo out. Maybe he can field this one real quick. This might have two answers depending on what kind of. It's possible we're talking about sixth chords and also sixths here. So maybe Jody, if you want to tell us about sixth chords and then also sixths.
How about I'll do the sixth chords.
Okay.
So make it real easy. You could take like I don't know, a C major here, and you're basically just playing the first, the third, the fifth, and then the sixth is on top. So if you're in C, it'd be the sixth note of the scale, C, D, E, F, G, A. So you're basically taking a C chord and adding an A on top. Now, the thing is I very rarely play that. I mean, that's kind of just a terrible, awkward shape. So normally my assumption is that there's going to be a guitar or a bass player. So I just forget the root, and I just, that's my ball game there. So that would be the easiest one. Yeah, and Jim, I just released a video on this.
I watched your video. That's where I learned it.
And I hate that. I usually don't use my thumb, believe it or not, when I do that, because it just hurts my thumb so much. But yeah, you can also put that sixth over there. That would be the like the C6.
Jody likes to think that he knows better, so he does all the ergonomic things that are probably good for his hands. But the rest of us,
and I've got just really large hands too. So that
I'm fine with. I'm content to just get arthritis. I don't know what the big deal is. We'll see. But
oh man, no, let's not even talk about that. I am struggling today for sure.
Oh man, that's terrible. This is kind of an interesting one. This is something I think about a lot. With all the things that there are to practice and work on, how do you guys think about, or maybe how did you think about when you were coming up, or what do you think about prioritizing things in terms of practicing?
Well, what I tell my students, and whether it's banjo students, ukulele students, and I'll be telling my auto harp students this soon, work on the thing that you need to work on right now. I don't pile on tons and tons of things. I don't learn something until I absolutely need it. I mean, and that's real life too, I mean, if I'm working on my car, most of the time I'm going to learn how to do that thing right then. I don't necessarily try to read ahead and know how, I'm going to change out the transmission. I'll deal with that when it comes up. But so I kind of, for me, I whatever that word is, starts with a P. I put things in order of importance based on my need of a certain thing at a time. It's like, I remember working on a break for a song that I did with a band, and it was a part where the mandolin and the banjo, I did a harmony part just through one little section of that mandolin solo. And I had to go back and really work on a ton of single string stuff, because that's my weakness. And so I spent a bunch of time working on single string things, even different than that one particular lick, just because that was what I felt like needed the priority at that moment. So that's just me.
Yeah. What about you, Jody?
Oh man, I can be the kind of person where I'll take one song and man, I'll just kind of run it in the ground, meaning that I'll take that one song and use it as a vehicle to practice everything. Like I might take that one song and just run nothing but licks through it. I might practice backup on the song, and so I'm a big fan of using repertoire to put to use whatever it is in the world I'm working on. I've also worked on just kind of pure technique stuff and sat down with that. But I don't know. I think if I go back into my earlier development, and even now, I'm just a big fan of just sitting and working on tunes and really just adding stuff into songs and using that as a device to put anything I'm working on into those tunes and just running it into the ground, basically.
Yeah.
I do that. I tend to get hung up on, I get hung up on a tune, and then like if I've learned a new lick or whatever, I try to stick it in everything. So if I learn a new lick, then suddenly it's my job to put that new lick in every song I know.
Right.
Yeah.
Until I'm super comfortable with it. But yeah, totally. I do the same thing. I'll get hung up on a tune. I mean, it'll be something dumb, but I get hung up on it, and that will be my project tune for days and days.
Yeah. Well, then it seems like we're kind of all on the same page, because I like to think that I'm not that organized when I practice sometimes, because I don't have, kind of like you guys are describing, I don't have all these different things in my mind when I'm practicing. Like, okay, now here's my 20 minutes of this, and then here's 20. It's definitely never been like that. And but what's interesting, I've been thinking about this, is that especially with working on tunes like that, that's something that I like a lot, especially because somebody wants to get better at playing hammer-ons or pull-offs. Well, you probably want to practice them in context, right? Or whatever. There's Cripple Creek's got hammer-ons and pull-offs and slides. You're going to get a little bit of everything. And what's really cool, what I've been thinking about, is that when you practice things and think about them as being a part of this tune or a part of this thing, I think it actually, you can store it in your mind a little easier than if it's just this kind of abstract thing that you're working on. When I think about different licks that I play, I don't really, the way I think about it is like, oh, that's that lick from that version of Blue Ridge Cabin Home, or that's that lick from so-and-so solo, whatever it is. And it doesn't mean that I play it in that place all the time. It just means I have a kind of a library. I have a place to put that book in the library so that I can find it again. Otherwise, because I've learned licks, I've made videos of like, here's 5 Bela Fleck licks or whatever it is. And I just picked them out of the thin air, and I didn't learn anything else. I just went and searched out some licks and learned them. I've never played those licks again, and I probably never will, But there's JD Crowe licks, and there was other Bela Fleck licks that I'll play all the time because it's attached to something that I work on. So, but I agree. I usually just drive something on the ground. I'll play Earl for 6 months until I realize I forgot how to play anything melodic or single string, and then I'll do that for 6 months and realize that I can't kick off 9-pound hammer, and then I'll have to go back and
I think
do it all over again.
One thing I would say is I feel like, and I'm sure Jim, even more so for Jim, is like when I was coming up, there was a lot of limited access to some of this stuff, like melodic banjo. I didn't even know what that was until I had already been playing, nothing but traditional style for a long time. So I didn't get distracted by a million different things because I didn't really have that. It wasn't there for me to get distracted for. It was just
same. Yeah, same for me for sure. I had stacks of records that Dad had, and then stuff I bought at the our little Donville grocery store had a bin of records, and it had bluegrass stuff in it, which, hard to believe that you could buy records at the grocery store. But I mean, I did. But that was, yeah, probably didn't. I remember one time Mom she brought home an album. It was an Alan Mundy album, Banjo Kid Rides Again. It was that album. She brought that home, and I thought, man, I'm going to learn some stuff off this album. I put it on the record player, and it was like me turning on the radio to the Spanish broadcast, and I'm thinking, okay, I know those are humans, and I know they're talking about something, but I have no idea what's going on. And so I had to put that album away. I mean, it was so foreign to me. It was probably 5 or 6 years before I was ready to try to decipher any of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and here's something interesting we'll kind of skip around a little bit because this is kind of related. Wondering about incorporating melodic phrases and ideas into playing and soloing. I mean, a lot of this seems like it's kind of the same thing we're talking about, where for one thing, it can be really helpful. You'll leave this up. For one thing, it can be really helpful to make sure that you learn it in the context of where it's supposed to go, where it actually fits. So usually that's maybe part of a tune or part of something. And then, kind of as you guys are describing, just like taking this idea and running it into the ground. I mean, as long as you know what the point of the lick that you're playing is, what it's supposed to do, some licks go from G to C and some licks go from D to G. And as long as you know what that is, and then you know where those places are in the songs, it's a lot about plugging it in so repetitively that it becomes comfortable. I mean, does that feel like that's kind of your experience?
Yeah. For me, and what I do with students here and what I do with myself, and the way that I got involved in incorporating any kind of melodic phrase was learning just a melodic G lick, just a fill-in lick. So like, we've all done, I don't have my picks, that lick. So, and if we do that lick, I would, like if you're a private student, which I don't have any right now. Well, I got one, but I mean, if we did that lick, we would learn a melodic lick instead. We would learn that. And so every time it comes up in a song where you would play, I say, don't play that, play your new melodic lick. And that's where you'll first get used to actually playing a melodic phrase in a tune. Later, you may actually figure out places to use that melodic phrase as part of the melody. But a good easy place to start sticking some melodic licks is just over your fill-in licks or over your intros or different things like that, where and then you can go back to your straight Scruggs style for the meat portion of it. Yeah,
totally. And with that lick, I mean, that's a cool lick because that you can use that in the place of those fill-in licks. And if you think about where it lands, it just lands on G. So you can kind of think about it like if you have a lick that ends on G, it's probably going to work in place of that lick. You could start a solo that way, really. I mean,
yeah,
it's some of this stuff. I know that this stuff feels complicated to people, and you can make it complicated depending on how you want to talk about it. But it can be simple. It definitely can be. You think about all these licks as being kind of point A to point B in a way. And really it's just about point B. As long as you land in the right place, then you're kind of good to go,
Yeah, that's usually my goal, is to end on the note that I really truly need it to be on. And I mean, it can be anything else in between, really. And I show students that all the time. I say, you can play a world of notes, end on the right one, and suddenly you're playing jazz or something. I don't know.
Playing something, yeah. Well, and this is even kind of related too. So when it comes to memorizing a lick or a song, I mean, I think the most obvious thing that probably everybody, if you ask them what the answer to this question is, they're like, well, you just play it over and over again. So, like, yes, that's true. And that's probably the most important part of it, is you got to do it over and over again. But do you guys have any other thoughts about how you actually go? Like, because for instance, I like doing that. I like just playing it 1.5 million times, and then again, probably about 1 million more times. That's just kind of fun for me. But it's not fun if it doesn't work. Sometimes it's frustrating because I forget things, or So for people who have tried playing it 1 million times, or think they've played it 1 million times, but really maybe they've played it 1,000 times, and they're frustrated. Do you guys have any other thoughts about memorizing things?
I don't memorize anything. I mean, I'll memorize a lick, kinda. I mean, I think in my head, I kind of hear the lick, but I don't really memorize. And I've had a bunch of questions just recently on my YouTube channel. It's like, how do I memorize all these tabs? How do you have all of these songs memorized? And I guess my advice there is quit memorizing tabs and quit memorizing sequences of notes. I mean, everybody can sing a song. I mean, would like, if you know a song, you hunt and peck those notes and find them. But I don't memorize. I don't memorize anything. I mean, maybe I memorize how the melody goes, but I don't. And I don't. I don't think any of our banjo heroes memorized anything either. Maybe I memorized a few key licks, but I wouldn't. That is really not like. And then that came from what just playing them 1 million times.
Well, that opens an interesting thing. And Jody, I'm curious about your answer to this too, because I'm sure we've all kind of got different perspectives. But what's interesting, Jim, is what you've ended up with after not memorizing things is. And not that I'm not refuting you at all, certainly. This is actually really, really cool, is that, I think for people that are starting out who don't have a language, who don't have licks, don't have that other stuff, come at it from, okay, I need to acquire all this stuff. How long is that going to take? When do I get there? All this stuff. But the perspective you've looked at it from is you're just seeking to play this music. You're seeking to play this melody. You're seeking to play the song. You might learn a lick if it's cool, whatever. But now, after however many years of this journey it's been so far, you've kind of just still arrived where people arrive who try to memorize things and have all this frustration, is you can play the music, you can play the important licks, and you're in the style and all this. It's, it's like it sounds, what you're describing is doing it without all the frustration and the, oh, I need to I got measure 4 wrong. And then it's like,
well, see, like for me, and I see this with students all the time. They'll come in and they'll purchase the Earl Scruggs book or one of Jack Hatfield's books, and they feel like that they need to know everything in that book. And I'm like, look, man, if you can do a Cripple Creek roll and a couple of other roll patterns, man, you can survive anything. I mean, if you can do an alternating roll with a slide, man, you can build anything you want to build, and it's going to sound like a banjo break. Will it sound like what JD played? No. Will it sound like what Don Reno played? No. But will it sound like the song? Yeah, absolutely. It's going to sound just like the song. And so, I tend to work with a very small toolbox of licks. I could probably write down everything I know about playing the banjo on an index card. It's so limited. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
I am the Mexican restaurant of banjo players. I mean, I've got like 6 ingredients, and I make everything from that.
Well, and and that's a perfect analogy too, because it may be on an index card like that, but it also ends up with so many options. There's so many different things you can do with it and create so many.
Right.
So you're getting your money's worth out of relatively little, which is very cool. So on the other hand, I mean, so Jody, I know that you play on the banjo a lot of different styles of music, which requires like multiple languages, basically. I mean, there's the bluegrass side, obviously, which you're very accomplished with, but I mean, it sounds like a lot of the stuff that you've played on the banjo is kind of the stuff that requires memorization, like maybe it's classical pieces or arrangements that you've made of certain things. And, so I don't know, I wonder what your perspective is on kind of reconciling those things. Because I imagine some of what Jim is saying resonates with your experience as well, but I assume also that some of the stuff you play kind of has to be memorized in a certain way.
Yeah, like right off the bat, like let's just say like the most recent things, like those video games and movie themes, that's probably more along the lines of pure memorization. But I'll give you kind of an experience that I had when I started learning how to play jazz. Frankly, at first it was a complete failure, and I almost just kind of gave up. And I just couldn't get it. I'd always get lost in the songs, and it was very difficult harmonically. And I kind of reached this point. I said, well, how am I going about this different than bluegrass? Because I obviously learned how to play bluegrass. Like, what am I doing wrong here that is not working with this music? And the thing I kept coming back to was when I was learning how to play bluegrass, I primarily listened to vocal tunes, and I learned the lyrics and I learned the melodies in my head. So the thing that was kind of the big, eye-opening experience here for me with jazz was I actually started getting to the point where I could hum the melodies, sometimes learning the lyrics, and it all kind of fell back to me to just be able to hum the tunes. And I think that was the biggest thing for me as far as being able to memorize a ton of repertoire, is just listen to the song so much that I could sing it or hum it. And that's, for me, that's the part that I think resonates with Jim, because people ask me like, how do you know all these tunes? And I say, well, I'm not memorizing them. I hear it in my head and I know where it's at. But that's kind of easy to say, I guess, after you have been able to play these things too. You already know where things are at on the instrument. So, there is this line there somewhere between memorizing and then also just humming something and know where it's at. That's, it's hard to distinguish.
Part of that, I think part of that is not being afraid to just reach for a note and hope for the best. And if it's wrong, it's wrong. Don't be afraid to screw up, man. You just reach out there and I play a lot of terrible things.
I think a lot of it though is you've done things so much that you just know certain things work too. Like, you kind of eliminate possibilities. You're like, well, I know that's not good. I know that doesn't go with the key of G. I know it can't be that. So part of it's some of it I think is knowing. Just you've tried things so much, what things work, at the same time. Yeah.
I'm not going to put mayonnaise in my taco. I mean, it's just
yeah, exactly.
I just know that's not going to work.
But you only know that because you tried it one time, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, well, and it's an interesting thing because I get this question a lot, understandably, because full disclosure, basically everything that I post on YouTube is something that I've played exactly, note for note, exactly one way, which means I've memorized. So kind of on the other end of the spectrum, but not really, as I'm about to describe. I memorize almost everything that I play for the YouTube channel.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe what I don't make clear to people is that what I play in real life, you know, in when I'm just playing music with people or performing in any way, I probably never play anything that's been memorized.
Mm-hmm.
There are some very rare occasions, like maybe JD Crow's kickoff to such and such thing, just because why not? Maybe somebody in the audience will think that's kind of neat, but 99.9% of the time, I'm not playing anything memorized. I'm playing with the language that I've learned from the material that I looked at in the past. So it's okay, you know, it's good to look at this stuff as a thing to practice and a thing to learn, and you know, nothing wrong with memorization, but make sure you kind of understand what the point of the material that you're looking at is. The point of the material isn't to say this is Blue Ridge Cabin Home. This is to say, well, this is how one person could interpret this song, and you can use some of this material to interpret a different song similarly or something like that. So,
yeah,
you know, it's
a good example of that. Somebody, so I recently did that live lesson of Doing My Time, and then somebody made a comment, said, "Would you teach Big Spike Hammer?" And I'm going, you know, it's the same song. It's got the same. The only difference between Doing My Time and Big Spike Hammer is Big Spike Hammer's got a C and an E minor in it. But it's the same licks. I mean, they're the same licks. It's the same. And so that's probably going to be my next live lesson. You heard it here first. We're going to show you how Big Spike Hammer is the same. I mean, especially the break that JD plays on the Bluegrass album. I mean, that's Doing My Time. I mean, it's got the same components.
And by the way, if you want to catch that live stream where Jim's going to explain all of this, you should click on the link below in the description, which will instantly subscribe you to Jim's channel. And Jody, you can subscribe to Jody's channel as well, where he will have a live video teaching you how to add an E minor and a C into Doing My Time. And it's not where you'd think it would be.
We should all do a video on Doing My Time this week.
Yeah.
And see what we can come up with.
Interestingly enough, I'll also advertise for myself. If you'd like to learn how JD Crow played his kickoff to Big Spike Hammer, I can show you that on my YouTube channel. Anyway, we got all kinds of stuff to work on here. Oh, this is interesting. Never heard this question before, but it's actually a good question. It really is. First of all, what do you guys use for picks? And then we can talk about pick noise if anyone has any thoughts about it.
Picks. Yeah, I'm the oddball here, y'all. There they are. This is a do as I say, not as I do. Don't use these. You can't get good tone with these. I just used these for so long, and I wound up using them strictly by accident. I had used Dunlop finger picks forever. I dropped, stepped on, and broke one of my Dunlop picks, and the only thing I had in my case were these. Somebody had given me at a contest a set of these Ernie balls, and it was all I had. So I had to use them. And then, you know, a couple of days later, I was used to them, and now I can't use anything else.
And the rest is history.
Yeah. But I will say this, they don't have much pick noise because there's just not much pick there.
Yeah. Well, and that's super interesting. And I don't think we would have a good answer to this pick noise question without those picks, because I think what people are experiencing with pick noise, and I don't know if you guys have thoughts on this. I'm no scientist, obviously, but the pick noise, there is always going to be pick noise, right? You can't stop there from being pick noise. You either hear it or you don't. Sometimes, I guess you could have really loud pick noise that you can hear really clearly. That happens. But I mean, it's pretty obvious. How does pick noise happen? Well, the pick makes contact with the strings, and that makes a noise. Well, I kind of just feel like if your pick spends a lot of time kind of scraping along the string as you pluck the note, it's going to make a lot more noise, which might actually be why Jim doesn't experience that, among other reasons, but because there's not that much to be scraping along the string, right?
And then the other thing that I've kind of discovered watching students that I felt like had bad pick noise. So you've got a string and it's vibrating. Okay. So the string is vibrating and you're coming at it with a pick and it's going to bounce off the pick as you go by. And really you need to get on by that string, because and a lot of people, as you're approaching that vibrating string, you slow down. You're not picking through it. And I think maybe if you think about picking through that string, it might eliminate some of your pick noise. There's an album. I think it's the Green Grissman album with the mandolin on the front. It's one of those, but there's some banjo playing on it, and man, it's just got a ton of pick noise, and I feel like I don't remember who it was playing on it, but it just really felt like that they were slowing down just a microsecond before they hit that string, and you hear the string go as they go by it. I don't know.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, no, I think that's probably true. And a lot of that. I mean, that's why I think people who are just starting out have this issue, is because there's this kind of lack of confidence. There's this lack of real, authority that, like, I know I'm supposed to be hitting this string right now, so I'm just going to do it. But you kind of just have to play through the string with authority, which even if you don't feel confident about what you're doing, you kind of have to pretend for a minute. And once you pretend for a minute and it sounds okay, then you can kind of say, oh, maybe I do know what I'm doing here. So yeah. Jody, do you have an example for us?
I was just going to say, like I just through teaching, I think a lot of times like students just kind of glaze the strings and they get that kind of sound because they're not really, number one, it's like you said, I don't think some of them don't have the confidence yet to just follow through the string. But you can also, if you're just kind of playing really light, just tickling the strings, you'll get a lot of noise there. So it's weird. I think, the banjo is such a loud instrument. I found that students a lot of times simply just don't play hard enough. It's like they're afraid of all the sound that comes out of it. So that can help.
Yeah, I had a similar, speaking about playing hard enough, I was teaching at Kaufman Camp last time I was there, and we do these master classes where folks can come to you and they play for you, and you just give them, it's radical honesty. You just tell them exactly what they're doing wrong. And this guy comes to me, and he says, my banjo's just not loud. I don't know. I think there's something wrong with it. It's just not loud. And I said, well, here, let me see it. And I play it. And he said, wait a minute, how's that banjo so loud? I said, maybe you're not picking hard enough. And so we sat for the next few minutes, me going, no, harder. No, harder. You're going to have to hit the string a little faster and a little harder, And that, which is another one of those, it's a word game, but not necessarily harder. You don't necessarily want to pick harder. I think maybe faster is a better term. And I don't mean tempo wise, but striking the string, it's the same way you hit a baseball further. You don't hit it harder, you hit it faster, it's your bat speed. And so same thing, pick speed, that's going to eliminate some pick noise as well as get that string moving as well. So.
That makes sense. Yeah. I mean, it seems like this, here I go with something I'm not educated enough to talk about, but I think it's possible that what we're talking about is velocity. Like, is that the combination between the speed and the power or something like, anyway, it's this, you could pull back on the string like a bow and arrow and tear the string in half if you want. That's enough power, right? And you could play really fast and barely touch the string. So you kind of have to find this balance somewhere where you're playing fast enough that you're playing through the string and you're not going to get all this pick noise. But you do want to use the muscles in your hand. I mean, I know people talk about you don't want to play with tension, don't play too loud. There's a lot of really good advice out there, but if it doesn't sound like bluegrass banjo, then you might have to sacrifice a little bit of that good advice to make it sound better. All right. What do we got? I might skip ahead a little bit real quick.
Don't skip too far ahead. You got somebody you need to deal with.
Oh yeah. Oh boy.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
hey, there you go. Oh, wow. All righty. Well,
Yeah.
how about that? Wouldn't you know it? It's just that easy.
Okay.
Well, folks, here we are live on the internet.
It's amazing. It's amazing what goes on the internet.
It truly is.
Don't make Jim get his auto harp out again.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, come it, bring it out the auto harp.
Jody, oh yeah, I'm Jody. I see your message. Thanks for letting me know, and sorry for ignoring
thanks.
you, not knowing that was happening. Okay, so, oh, here's something kind of interesting. Started to learn bluegrass guitar. So this is a guitar question that we don't have to talk about guitar at all, because the real question here is, what's likely to be the biggest thing missing from playing with others? So just maybe if we could talk about kind of why it's important to play with other people and what you can get out of that. Because I know for some people it can be really, it can be a little bit stressful or intimidating. And you can also start wondering, like, when do I do that? When do I start playing with other people? When am I good enough to do that? How do I do that? You know, we don't need to talk about every aspect of it, but maybe just to stress why it's so important to play with other people.
I started playing with other people almost right off the bat. You know, my dad played guitar and mandolin, and so we played together a lot just in the very beginning. And then I had an aunt that sang, and we would play around like little country churches, and she would sing, and Dad and I would play together. And then when I moved to in 10th grade, I went to a different high school, and I met a guy on the school bus that played guitar and was learning banjo, and so we started playing together immediately. And so before I could really play, I was playing with other people. I mean,
yeah, that was my experience for sure, is that I was playing with people before I knew that I wasn't good enough to play with people. You know, which is a good thing, I think, was, you know, it was before I was playing. You know, I tried to as kind of as early as I could anyway, just because I knew I'd played other types of music when I started playing banjo, that I knew that was going to be important. And so before I even, you know, really understood what I was supposed to be doing all the time, you know, I was kind of leaning on the generosity of people who were at these beginner jam sessions, kind of there to help out. There are a lot of jam sessions like that. So what about you, Jody?
Well, I would say, you know, number one is just developing a sense of timing and ability to feel the timing with other people. But I think the thing, I guess my experience was weird as I was learning how to play. There were all these things that no one really taught me, and I had to learn them at the jam. Like, I had to learn basically what are pickup notes, and you know, I'm over here and I would start my break and it would be two beats late because I'm putting the pickup notes right on beat one, you know, and just silly things like that I didn't know anything about. But also just, you know, learning how to not overplay too, you know, that's the main thing, I think, for me.
See, I remember Jody when he was, I remember Jody back then. He learned quick.
I bet. I'm not surprised. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I think you can get a lot out of playing with a metronome or playing with along with a record. There's a lot of ways that you can get a lot of things done and learn a lot about, you know, but there is absolutely no substitute for the unpredictability of playing with somebody, whether they're the strong, you know, very experienced musician that you kind of have to keep up with, which is very helpful. Or if the person you're playing with is, you know, maybe less experienced than you are and is kind of struggling to keep up with you, well, that's a lot of responsibility for you to keep things in check. And that's really helpful also. That can, you know, no matter who you're playing with, you kind of have a job to successfully do. And doing that over and over again is something that you can't really, there's no other way to do that, really.
Right.
I spent so much time you know, obviously my dad worked and I spent a lot of time at home by myself, playing along with records, and I would put on. And so here's the thing: playing with records helped me to do. The first thing that playing along with records, it helped me to tune my banjo, because if I was listening to Ralph Stanley, or if I put on Raymond Fairchild, or if I put on a Little Roy Lewis album, or if I put on Flatt and Scruggs, I mean, you literally, on those old albums, you might have to retune your banjo for every track on those albums. I mean, like Foggy Mountain Banjo album is a perfect example of that, where you've got ground speed that was cut like 3 years earlier to that album, and he's tuned to G sharp, and then you tune up to that, and then the next cut on the track, now you're tuning back down. And so I learned to tune, and then I learned on the other thing, playing with those older albums, is you learn this ebb and flow in the music. So on all that Flatt and Scruggs stuff, you like Paul Warren plays the fiddle, the tempos just go skyrocket. I mean, the man speeds up. And then when Lester comes back in with the vocal, it slows back down. And so you feel this ebb and flow. And then the thing I made myself do was, I played backup when Earl played backup. I played lead when Earl played lead. I try to copy his breaks as best I could. So in doing that, when I went to my very first actual jam session, I kind of knew how it worked just by simply playing along with those records. So I wasn't totally, I was oblivious to the social aspect of it, but musically I knew when the banjo was supposed to be there, when it was not supposed to be there. And I knew how that worked, and I was able to match tempos and those sorts of things, and understand, especially because I had a couple of live recordings that I would play along with too. And so sometimes, like in a band, the singer gets to the end of his vocal, and now you've got this space that's ambiguous. Are we going to, is it going to continue? We're going to add a measure. We're going to subtract a measure. And so I kind of figured out how to do that as well. But so for me, I don't know that I've ever spent more than, in the 40 some years I've played, I've probably not spent 30 minutes playing with a metronome, but I've probably spent hundreds and hundreds of hours playing along with recorded albums of all the, I figure if I can play along with Flatt and Scruggs and J.D. Crowe and Osborne Brothers, if I'm playing along with them, I'm playing, figure that picking up some good habits anyway, I hope.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, that's what we're trying to emulate, or at least have some ability to emulate, I think. This is kind of an interesting question. Talking about getting a grasp of the bluegrass language from a guitarist. This is the experience that I had. I played guitar exclusively for about 10 years before I picked up the banjo. And it was one of those things where I thought I knew better. I thought, well, I can play guitar. I know jazz chords. I can play I can give you that altered scale if you need it on the 5 chord, but then I played the banjo, and it did me just about no good to be able to do any of that or understand any of that. So I really like the last sentence of this. I really want to be a banjo player and not just a guitarist on banjo. And I'll pass it off to these guys, but I also, just having had this exact experience, basically, I think the thing that I've learned to think about is in bluegrass, the banjo has a job. And you don't have to be that specific about what it is. You just listen to what banjo players do. Listen to what Earl Scruggs does, and Sonny Osborne, and whoever. They all do certain things. It's kind of based on what Earl did, but people kind of have their own idea. But I had to put aside the things that I already understood about music to a certain extent. I had to put aside things that didn't help me do what banjo players do. So I kind of had to say, yeah, I know what that chord is, and I know what that melody note is, and if I know that if I add this cool note here, it'll do this thing. None of that really actually had anything to do with what banjo players do. So at a certain point, I kind of had to just go into it blindly and say, okay, in this situation, what would a banjo player do? And you can usually find an album or a song where the banjo player does a certain thing, and you can say, oh, that's what the banjo player does there. And then you want to emulate that thing. So I know you guys probably have thoughts about this, but my experience was definitely just that, my guitar knowledge maybe made it easier to learn the banjo, but that guitar knowledge does not really factor into myself being a banjo player all the time. I kind of have to forget some of that stuff that doesn't help me be a banjo player in the bluegrass context anyway, you know. But I don't know. What do you think, Jody?
Well, I started off on guitar as well. And so I think, you know, like you said, I think it helped me with the left-hand facility of things, but it's just a whole nother ball game. You know, kind of going back to what Jim said, I kind of learned for a while, maybe about a year or so. And I think the thing that really helped me was just getting out albums and playing along with it and just, you know, immersing yourself in the language. And I always tell my students, I think, you know, sometimes people are, they have like a perfectionist mindset and they really want to get the album and they want to make sure they have all the notes exactly right. But for me, I didn't really approach it that way at all. I would just sit down with a recording and try to get something that resembled it, you know, and I would just, you know, kind of honestly, kind of what you're doing here on YouTube, Eli, which is, you know, learn people's solos. Like, you know, if you like J.D. Crowe, go learn 3 of his solos, and you don't have to be 100% accurate. Just try to get as much as you can, you know, whether it's timing or, you know, pull-offs or licks or whatnot. But I think just immerse yourself in someone's playing is a big thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned kind of not learning everything that somebody does. One of the things I've been doing lately is playing along with records as if I had learned what the person played. You know, I'll slow it down and play along as if that's the case, but I won't really learn exactly what it is. I just want to hear what's happening and hear what I'm doing and see, okay, is what I'm doing, does that really fit with what's happening right now? Can I kind of emulate that with what I have, you know, without trying to perfectly cover what somebody is doing necessarily. I just want to feel like that, because we kind of all know that the notes really aren't what makes the difference here. The notes aren't the thing that really makes you feel a certain way. It's the emphasis and the rhythm and the you know, the attitude of it. So, you know, even if I don't play exactly what J.D. Crowe plays all the time, maybe I can emulate something else about it. So I like that a lot. What about you, Jim?
Yeah, you know, I like to take a break, or, you know, I'll hear JD do something or whoever that I like, you know, at the time, and their break will go a certain direction where it, you know, and they may use certain licks to get there, but I may not know those licks, but I'm not necessarily going to slow the record down and figure out the exact lick that they're doing, but I might know a lick that's close to what they're doing, and I can, you know, mash that lick into that spot and make it work. And so I've done that early on. I met Raymond Fairchild, and when I was probably 14, and I was picking a little bit, and he had handed me his banjo to play, and I was playing. He was talking to Dad, and then he turned around to me and he says, "You're doing real good, boy, but just don't copy nobody." And it's like, oh, okay. And it's like, because, you know, at that point, you know, I wanted to play everything just like, you know, Earl played this, or, you know, Ralph Stanley played it like this. And so from that point on, I really did change my focus to try to play more like me and not necessarily like someone else. But I still have these moments, even now, where I will listen to a break and try to figure out what exactly somebody's doing. Yeah, but I'm still, I don't know. I'm still the guy that wants to play like, you know, me. I'll steal a lick, and I mean, you did that. I think it was, what was it, 5 J.D. Crowe licks or whatever, you know, and it's like I went through and there was like 2 of those I didn't know. I'm going, okay, I got to put those in the arsenal. So I will steal those. And not only will I steal them, but then I mess them up. You know, I change them. I make them, you know, so then they almost become unidentifiable as a J.D. Crowe lick, but they're definitely come from there, you know.
Totally. And what's cool is, you know, you talk about wanting to play like yourself, but learning these other people's licks here and there. Well, kind of the way I feel about it is that's a really good way to play like yourself, is if you really trust, you know, when I hear a lick that I like, I say, ooh, I want to learn that. That's really cool. But I hear probably 1,000 licks that I don't even think about. I just hear them and they're fine. They might be great and I might love them, but my ears don't perk up the same way and I don't learn them. You know,
Right.
I'll learn stuff just as a way to practice. So I'll learn a bunch of whatever, but the things that really make me, you know, kind of excited, learning that lick and then using it, that's going to become what I sound like, because I've picked 2 of this person's lick and 2, you know, I'm playing, you know, whatever 100 licks from 40 banjo players, and none of those 40 banjo players are playing the other licks that I've taken from the other 39, whatever it is. You know, you can kind of craft your own thing. And I think if you kind of just trust what you like, you're going to build that sound for yourself. I think people are a little worried sometimes that they need to learn everything Earl did and everything JD did and everything that Bill Keith did. And it's like, there really isn't anybody out there who's done that. And if there is, you haven't heard of them because they're still in their basement trying to finish that project, you know, like,
yeah. I mean, I'm like the worst thief, you know, because I do go through phases where I steal a lot of ideas from certain pickers. And I don't, but for me, I don't really steal them. Like, I don't have a method for stealing them, but like, if I'm going to listen to, you know, Bill Emerson, then I will listen to Bill Emerson almost exclusively as the banjo player I'm listening to. And then my brain will start to sort out some of what I'm hearing. And then I'll start to feel some of those licks on the banjo. I did that with Alan Mundy. You know, there was a point where I was listening to nothing but Alan Mundy. And then I'm playing and somebody says, well, that kind of like you sound sort of like this guy. And it's like, well, yeah, because that's all I'm listening to right now. You know, I'm picking up an accent, I guess, in some ways.
Yeah. That's interesting. Here's something good. This is something I've experienced many times today even. Have you ever recorded yourself and play it back and it sounds so different, worse, than what your ear was hearing when you're playing the song? This is probably one of the things that I spend the most time thinking about in my own you know, when I am evaluating my own playing. This is a very common experience. Have you guys ever experienced this?
Yeah, all the time.
Never. I never experienced this. No, not at all. Man, it's like flipping all the time. It's like, yeah, that sounds pretty good. Yeah, I like that. And then I have gone to the point like shooting a video and I'm thinking, okay, that's the break I'm going to use. and then I'll go back and be editing and I'll listen to the break and go, well, that's just utter trash. Now I got to go back and set up the camera again, try to sit where I was and re-record, you know, a video at a later time. And then remember what I tried to play previously, because see, the way I work, I play the break and then I teach you what I play. It's not the other way around, you know? And so, you know, and if you put video time, editing time in between me going back and trying to play that break, it's going to be different again. And so, yeah, oh man, constantly deal with that. And, you know, when we went up and recorded the Ramblers thing, there was so much that I'd listen back to, you know, sitting there with Brent and listening to it. I'm going, I need to go back in and recut like that whole song, you know, just the whole thing again or whatever, because and he's like, no, I thought it sounded fine. I say, well, it doesn't. So let me go do it. You know?
Yeah.
But that brings up the other thing, you know, oftentimes we don't sound like what might be okay. I mean, I'm super critical of most everything that I do like that.
I think
absolutely. Yeah.
I think one thing sometimes that happens, you know, in particular when you're putting stuff on the internet or whatever, is you can kind of get focused on your playing in like certain little areas, and you're concentrating on those things being well and really good. And then these other things that you're not really thinking about, those things are kind of like lagging because you're just not thinking about them as you're like sitting there playing, you know? So I've had that happen with timing, you know, where I'm like, okay, I'm playing really, you know, I'm working on my dynamics and I'm playing really, you know, musical, but then I listen back and I'm like, yeah, the timing's really bad. You know, I didn't pay enough attention to the timing. So
I mean, it's hard to keep track of everything all at the same time. You know, never mind the fact that if I could, do I have the skill to do them well? Even if I could think about them all, you know, it's an interesting thing, especially because I think we probably experienced this more than anyone, just because we're recording ourselves and then editing, and we have to listen to every note that we play and then put on the internet, you know, probably every week for the most part. And that can be kind of a pain. I mean, at this point, we've all just done it so many times that if it's terrible and it needs to be redone, then we redo it. But you know, we've kind of
sometimes I don't.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And you know, there's kind of the general pain of just listening to yourself. That's just I feel like I've just gotten over that. I feel like I can at least think about what's wrong with it instead of just having this existential, oh my God, why am I even doing this? You know, that happens, but it's not as much as it used to happen, certainly. But I think, you know, because I think I would guess that there's a lot of people wondering about that same thing, that, you know, have recorded themselves and say, oh, turns out actually I can't play the banjo at all. And I've been lying to myself and everyone around me, and everyone else has been lying to me too. You know, that's kind of how it feels. And I bet a bunch of people listening right now feel that way. And I hope that you recognize that the fact that we experience that, you know, on a regular basis, means that what
every time I cut a video. Yeah.
I mean, really, it's like, okay, well, that'll have to do. I guess I'll do better next time. There's a lot of that going on. And you know, if that's been your experience, you know, for anyone listening, I hope you can at least recognize that that's part of the process. I mean, I've learned so much from doing that. I've learned so much from saying, like, okay, when I hold my hand like that, because I'm watching the video, that seems to not do the thing that I want. Or, okay, maybe I didn't set up the banjo quite the way I thought I did, or took that a little too fast, or whatever a million things that can go wrong are. I mean, you can put a lot of weight into that one recording that you just did. You can, if you want, you can tell yourself that that's representative of you as a banjo player, end all be all. That's like the best example of you as a banjo. Like, you can, and that's probably what we do, is we feel that way, and we say, like, well, if that's bad, then everything I've ever done before that is bad. So I'm sure everything I do from this point on is going to be just as bad. And the same thing happens when you play something and it sounds great, right? Or like, I've recorded stuff and be like, oh, well, this is great. I'm on the right track. I'm good. I think actually probably I'm on track to just being probably one of the best of all time. And I should just keep trucking because it's great. Until that next time when like 5 seconds later, I'm like, well, I'd like to hear something else that's just that good. I think that was really good. Let's hear another one. And I do it again 5 seconds later. And it's like, oh, actually I was wrong the whole time. This is, you know, it's a totally horrible, nefarious thing that we do to ourselves. But here's the light at the end of the tunnel, I think, is, you know, all three of us anyway do this on a regular basis, and we feel that way on a regular basis, and somehow we survive and we live to do it again the next week, and maybe have a similar reaction to our play, whatever it is. But it's such a productive thing to do, and if you can do it and take it seriously but not personally, you know, if you can think it's really important but not think that it reflects on you as a person or a banjo player, then you can get a lot out of it. I think you just kind of have to take it you have to take it kind of lightly in a way. You have to kind of not think of it as life or death. That's been my experience anyway.
Yeah, nobody's going to get hurt. I mean, you know, you're going to get through it. It's fine. And that was one of the things that was fun, like going to the studio to record, you know, with the Ramblers, is that, yeah, the red light's on, you're recording, but there's this safety net. So it kind of frees you up to do things, just to really, you know, go out on that limb and try that lick that you've been working on. And then, you know, but there's also the frustration with it too. I mean, there's a blooper reel of some of the stuff that we did in the studio, and it's just so, and it would be embarrassing if it got out, but there's just, but that's part of it. You know, you're wanting to you're really trying so hard to put your best foot forward, make a good impression. And, you know, and the three of us, we're trying to teach, and we're trying to do it the very best we can. and package it in such a way that's understandable. And so, yeah, I mean, there's just enough pressure there to, where I have actually sat and shot a video and then went delete. It's like, no, I'll come back to this at another date.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and it's funny. I think. So for actually, I don't think I've ever really talked about this. It's not that interesting, so that's why I didn't talk about it, I guess. But it's kind of interesting. The first video that I posted on YouTube was because when I graduated from East Tennessee State University with my degree in bluegrass, thereby crowning me with some sort of special knowledge and ability, apparently. If you went on YouTube and searched my name, there were a bunch of YouTube videos of me playing what I consider to be very poorly. So, if I wanted to be kind of like promoting myself as this apparently professional banjo player, and I was so embarrassed by these videos that had been uploaded by who knows who about student concerts and whatever, So I said, oh, I'll upload my own YouTube videos and I'll bury those in the YouTube list. And you can still find them pretty easily, honestly. You'll go find them. It's not that hard. But the problem is there's a bunch of videos that I've posted since then where it's like, okay, I got to post some more videos to bury the stuff that I play out. It's never ending, and I don't want it to end because it's part of the reason that I think I can get better. I mean,
I told Jim this story. There's a video somewhere of me. I don't know where it's at. It's like maybe 10 years ago or something. And it was just awful. It was kind of like a pickup band and I was just playing awful. And I told Jim, I said, I went on there and I even gave myself a thumbs down, hoping that it would go down in the rankings.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Get rid of it.
There's this video of me with Lone Mountain Band. We played this festival in Texas, and Roy kicks off this tune, and I mean, we're blazing. I mean, it is screaming. It's got to be 160 beats. I mean, it's just screaming. And the banjo break comes, and man, I'm on it. I'm there up until I don't know, like the last part of the break, and then it just falls completely apart. And I mean, it's like I don't even know what planet I'm on, much less what tune I'm playing. And it's out there for the world to see, and there's no fixing it. And it's like, fortunately, it doesn't come up very high in the rankings. So
right.
And it's like, man,
that's too funny.
I mean, Roy killed his break, but mine is just disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, it's as far as I can tell, I've got a lot more of that in my future. So I feel like I just got to get used to it. I mean, that's it really is we're just getting used to it really. I mean, if Earl can, in these live recordings, you hear Earl miss chords, you hear him go to a chord too soon, you hear him just totally blow a chord or playing out of tune. Hey, good enough for Earl. Man, I've got that stuff down. Yeah, right. Exactly. All right, so let's see. How about something a little different? What's interesting? How about how to get out of a banjo plateau and find inspiration? I know, I can tell you easily that there's no limit to the things that you can learn and practice and work on and whatever, but it doesn't always feel that way. So what do you guys do if you ever kind of feel stagnant in any way?
I took a lesson. It was 1992, and I had been playing 13, 14 years at that point, maybe 15 years. I've been playing a while. I've been playing in a band and, and working and teaching, but I really felt like I was just really bored with what I was doing. I really wasn't learning anything else. So I got on the phone and called Tony Trischka. I found his phone number. He was in the phone book, and I called him up and I said, "Hey, you do private lessons, right?" He says, "Yeah." I said, "Would you spend a couple of hours with me?" He said, "I'd be glad to." So I drove to Fair Lawn, New Jersey, and spent 3 hours with Tony Trischka in his living room, and just handing me idea after idea after idea. I mean, I had a stack of notes that I took. I mean, it's probably 50 pages of notes that I took during that lesson. And it was such a boost, not so much to give me, it was, I mean, I don't know that musically that I gained much or anything, but it was so motivational. It helped me start looking at things a little differently. So take a lesson. And now with the internet, I mean, you can sign up for lessons with Tony Trischka or just Jody or Eli. I mean, you can sign it, and they will give you something that will literally change your life. And that's what happened to me with Tony. I mean, there was just ideas. And then once I got to know Bill Keefe, you know, he would send me text messages and he says, "Hey Jim, try this." And it would be a text message of something for him. It was just encouragement or something stupid. It was just an idea. He says,
Yeah.
"Get your circle of fifths out and do this with it." And I'm going, really? No. And so I'd have my circle of fifths drawing lines, you know, it was just stuff that Bill thought of. And so, but find somebody that motivates you, that you can, you know, go to a camp,
Mm-hmm.
go to, you know, take a class, do something online, spend that time with, you know, but that's how I got out of my plateau, was just a lesson, you know, a 3-hour banjo lesson that I, you know, drove about however far it is from North Georgia all the way to Fair Lawn, New Jersey. I mean, it was
yeah.
But it was totally worth it. It was totally worth it.
That's so cool. Yeah. What about you, Jody?
I'd say probably one thing that is, you know, if like I've, you know, certainly over the years just got burned out on certain types of music, and I think one of the things that's helped me is just pick something completely different and maybe opposite, and just kind of immerse myself in that for a bit. You know, like at some point I got burned out on jazz pretty heavily, and I was like, okay, I'm going to go. And I kind of got into like this Cuban rhythm thing, and I started studying just rhythm stuff. Or maybe it was bossa nova or something else, but I would switch genres a lot of times, you know, and then come back to bluegrass or whatnot. As far as inspiration, one of the things, unfortunately, you can't do it right now, but I found that like if I ever went through times where I was, say, not practicing or just feeling not inspired, is I would go see great musicians play. And that was something that always I would just get excited and be like, okay, I can't wait to play again. You know, so that's always been a source of inspiration for me, is just going and hearing live music if I got in those phases. But certainly just picking different subjects. You know, if I felt stuck on something, I would move away from it and go find something else to do.
Yeah.
Because you have to beat yourself, you know, against that wall and not break through it. It's just,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like what you guys are both talking about is, you know, exposing yourself to something that you're not doing already, something new. And I feel like one of the challenges with that is, like, let's say you're in that plateau position. Okay, the things that you're comfortable with, the things that you're used to you're not developing those, right? Because you can't play faster, or you don't feel like something's getting better. So that's a problem, right? And here's the other challenge, is then there's new things everywhere, right? You could go on YouTube, again, you can see music, you can take a lesson, all this stuff. The problem is learning that new stuff isn't going to be easy. Actually, it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard because you don't know anything about it. It's something new. So, you know, I think it's so important to do those new things and get interested in those new things, but keep in mind that it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be the reason that it's inspiring, and the reason that it's interesting, and the reason that it's going to fix your plateau is because you're kind of addressing something that you can't do, right? It's something that's new to the equation. So again, it's like anything that we're talking about. You kind of have to be ready for that to be a challenge and be a hurdle to get over, and then you're going to see those results. But I think that's can be one of the things that's so difficult about the plateau is you're kind of between a rock and a hard place. It's like, well, I could just sit here and not get better and be frustrated, or I could go out in the world and try something new and be bad at it, and that's frustrating, you know. But it's kind of the only way out. You can't really do anything else. There's not another way to do it. So I think it's worth wading into that, you know.
that's part of the reason for this whole auto harp thing for me. You know,
Cool.
I mean, because it's making me think differently. It makes me think about chords differently. And so now when I sit with the banjo, then I'm applying ideas, you know, like how to build these melody lines using chords on the auto harp has forced me to be able to do that a little more on the banjo, where on the banjo, I can kind of ignore that. On the auto harp, I have to constantly think about chord melodies. And I had never really thought about that before. So now, thanks to this infernal auto harp, I've got a little better idea of how chord melodies work, which I never really thought about much.
That's super interesting. So, yeah. So it could even be a different instrument. It could be something totally different that doesn't even help you play the rolls, or that, you know, it could be just something that keeps your brain and your you know, body doing something that it's not used to. There's a lot of, I mean, look, even honestly, even taking a couple days off, take a week off, and you know, that can do a little bit for you, that you just come back. I know what happens to me is sometimes I'll get really interested in a certain thing that I want to do. I want to play like a certain person a little bit, or I want to get to a certain speed, or there's just something I want to do. And I'm so set on that, and I can overthink it. I can push it a little too hard and say, why isn't it all these things where I'm so frustrated and say, I'm not making any progress. It's like it was worse than it was before. And sometimes I'll, you know, usually it's not on purpose. Usually I have to have this happen by accident, unfortunately, but I won't play for a week. I'll go somewhere or I'll be too busy to play for some project on a house, trying to, like, you know, renovate something or whatever it is. And I'll pick up the banjo again, and I'll forget the thing that I was trying to do. And I'll just use what I actually have to try to play some music. And it actually sounds pretty good. I mean, part of it is, if I spend all my time trying to do something, I'm kind of always going to be dissatisfied with it, because I'm kind of always reaching for this other thing that I don't have. But if I can settle in with what I actually have, the things that I'm really comfortable with, it might not be the cool thing that I'm trying to do all the time, but at least it sounds like I've got something in the bag. So that can be really helpful too, I think. All right, let's see what we're working with here. I don't want to take up all your time, by the way.
Yeah, there's an article that I refer people to all the time, and it's a photography article. It's out on 43folders.com, but it's by Merlin Mann. And the title of that article is Photography and the Tolerance for Courageous Sucking. And he's talking about that, you know, when you're just first starting out on something and you're just beginning to learn things, you know, the bar is really low. I mean, we don't have, you know, so, and then the other thing he talks about is like growth. You know, when you're a kid and you're growing, you don't see yourself growing. You know, I've got marks over here on one of the doors where Samuel, when he grew, you know, you get a little taller, we put a mark on the door. But you don't see that happen. And so our growth, our progress, you know, a lot of people won't see that, and it's just going to be slow. But I mean, that's such a great article. It's Photography and the Tolerance for Courageous Sucking. You'll remember that title. It's just crazy enough. But it's geared toward photographers, but really it's not. It's geared toward artists in general, you know, because we all look at J.D. Crowe, or we look at Bill Emerson or Tony Ellis or whoever, and we're looking at it and we're going, man, I want to play like that. And I hear them play and I'm going, God, I don't think I'll ever be that good. But then maybe you hear somebody else play and you go, I'm at least that good. And he's got a working job, you know, he's playing for a living. But for we're always, you know, if you're growing and you're trying to grow, I get it. You know, it's hard sometimes to be willing to fail, but it's okay to be courageous and just suck.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That's how you get better.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know another way through that problem. I've never found a different way to get better than to go directly into the problem of being bad at the thing. You know, when somebody finds a new way to fix that, I'll do that. But until then, So let's do this. I think it's 4:30 now. We've
Wow.
got maybe a couple questions listed on the thing here, but depending on how you guys feel, maybe let's get to the 3 or so questions that have been asked already. Maybe we'll cut them off now, and then after those 3 questions, we'll call it if you guys are feeling like that's productive. But here's the thing: if you have more questions, because I know that people hear that we're ending the questions and then they say, "Wait a minute, what my question?" Well, you're in luck because the discussion continues on Discord. If you don't know what Discord is a website or an application. It's like a live chat room for whatever subject you're interested in, and this happens to be about the banjo. So if you look in the description of this video, there's a link where you can join Discord and you can talk to all 3 of us about the banjo, to the extent that all 3 of us are online, but you can talk to other people about the banjo, and you can get a lot of cool information, learn a lot about the banjo in real time, and it's cool. It's a little banjo community that we're all part of. I've seen Jim and Jody there plenty of times, and I'm there basically 24 hours a day, and so
what else are we doing?
Exactly.
You asked what we were doing during our social distancing. Yeah, we're all in the Discord.
Yeah, it's exactly. Yeah. So if you do have more questions, feel free to join us there. And so let's look at a couple more questions, and then we'll go back to the Discord. Basically, that's where you'll find us 20 seconds after this ends. But what was this question? Oh, here's a good one. This one this can be kind of quick because well, it doesn't have to be, but this goes a little bit to playing with other people and how to get used to that. What should I have under my belt before I join a band? Part of this is how much do you need to, is there something that you have to have before you join a band, or do you just do it,
Man, I just did. That was the thing in high school. The guy on the school bus played guitar, and we're riding on the school bus, and he says, if you were to join the FFA, Future Farmers of America, and we could put together a string band, because in Georgia at that time, they had FFA clubs would have a string band kind of thing. And so we did. So it was Mark and I and 2 other guys, and we put together a little bluegrass band right there in the high school. So, and not a single one of us had much experience playing music, but enough that we were able to sit and figure out how to do it together. And there's actually recordings of that out there. If you have to do a deep web search and find that,
Yeah.
But there's some of that out there. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, that comes up in the background check, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. What about you, Jody? Do you have thoughts about this? Just the idea of when is the right time to start?
I would definitely. I think I'm with Jim. I think sooner rather than later. I mean, it's one of those things. I feel like just go out there and play with other people as soon as you can, and figure it out as you go. In some ways, like don't wait till you got it. You think you have it figured out, because you don't.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're going to learn so much. Myself, I think he's using the word band, but for myself, I think one of the biggest learning times in my life was I had some buddies. I had 3 friends, and we would just get together a couple nights a week and pick one of their houses. And I don't know if we really had a band. We weren't like going out and playing public, but we had a regular meeting every week. And then there soon after, I actually got with a actual real band, and we were performing. But just having something, it's, if you call it a project, call it whatever you want, but having something where you go and you do it regular, that's going to motivate you more than anything, I think, personally. And I think that's the best part about it. You're going to learn. I mean, you're going to learn all the skills that you need to play with others, so.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree. My experience with any band that I've played with, or playing with people in general, is the times when I've learned the most is when I had to catch up to what I was supposed to be able to do. I don't really go into too many situations where I don't have some homework to do real quick to make sure I do better the next time. Right. The first band I joined, first band I joined that played festivals, first band that was quote unquote professional that was playing festivals, and I was in a position to make a fool of myself in front of my favorite banjo players once in a while. Well, I didn't figure out that I wasn't really ready to do that until I was on stage, making a fool of myself in front of banjo players that I really admired. And that was painful, but I learned pretty quickly what I needed to know for the next festival. And I probably learned more in the week between those two gigs than I probably ever have just saying, now I know what I need to, I don't think there's no too early to start, but I think, keep an eye out for the things that go well and don't go well when you play with people, and see what you can do to rectify that. If I remember going to a jam session back when I was playing jazz, that was a teacher that I had would let me come sit in on his gig, and it was a gig that was 3 sets, and he would, they would let people sit in on the second and third set. And I was the only person that ever showed up, because I don't know why. I just was the only person. So he would play the first set, and then they would take a set break, and then that was when I was younger. My parents would drive me to this, and then he would spend the second and third set hanging out with my parents and talking to them, and I would play the second and third set, which I was not prepared to do. I was really not ready for that. I was no prodigy, not like that at all. But I learned more doing that for a couple months than I did in 10 years of playing guitar, because the pressure was on. I never quite found a better way to learn than in real time, with the real thing happening,
Yeah, same here.
Yeah. So here's something. Well, let's see if I can even find this. So talking about scales, I think people have kind of a misconception that, once you learn scales, then you can use them to just play music. It'll just kind of happen, right? That the scales contain the music, and there's a lot of different ways you could think about it, but maybe if you guys could just talk a little bit about how you think about scales, what scales mean to you, and if anything like that.
What you said, the scales contain the music. No, that's backward. The music contains the scales.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Here's my confession. I can play a scale. I can play a G scale. That's it. That's the only one I know. I couldn't play you a C scale. I could root around and find it, but to be able to grab my banjo and play you a C scale, probably not going to happen. I don't think I ever thought about scales much. Even when I was learning melodic stuff and I was listening to Bill Keith and Alan Mundy and Jack Hicks and all those guys, I don't think I ever thought about a scale. I just was finding ways to get to the notes that I needed, but so yeah, I'm like the worst guy to ask about, should I learn scales? Because I'm going to say, man, I never learned them, but I'm kind of like the bad uncle.
Yeah. well, but again, though, that's what I like so much about a lot of your answers to these questions, Jim, is that you're self-professed that a lot of these answers are do as I say, not as I do, or whatever it is, and yet the way that you've done it, you've been able to achieve the sound that you have and your ability to. It's the same thing. Somebody asked me the other day if Earl Scruggs learned scales. And I doubt it. I doubt he knew. I'm sure he could move up and down the scale just from experience or something, but I can't imagine Earl Scruggs ever thought about something in terms of a scale or it's just what you've proven. And this is what's very cool is that I've got both you and Jody here is, there's a lot of ways to interpret the same information. And if we're going to play, not that I think Jody necessarily spending a lot of time thinking about scales while he's playing Blue Ridge Cabin Home. Probably not. Maybe it's possible, but just the idea that it's when people are trying to figure out like, okay, what's the right way to think about this? What's the right way to do this? That there's this equality of result, even if you're not going about it the same direction. All these things. So no, I think that's as valuable an answer as any, certainly. But anyway,
Jody,
what do you think, Jody?
Well, I'll show you my experience with
Yeah,
music.
please tell me the exact opposite of what Jim said, which
No,
will then validate my claims here.
No, it's definitely not. In some ways, I think that I will validate Jim's approach. And I think with music, the thing that people miss sometimes is I think the order that you learn things in is super important here. And I unfortunately have a very bad experience to share. When I was a kid, I was like 13 years old. I went in for a guitar lesson, and literally, no exaggeration, the first lesson, the guitar instructor gave me 7 modes. I did not know how to play a song. I didn't know how to do anything. I couldn't play anything. It was one of those things. It was such an awful experience that it was very vivid, because I'm sitting here, I'm like, I don't know how to do anything. You're showing me these things called Mixolydian and Dorian, and like, what do I do with this? And then fast forward, I got another guitar instructor, and it was almost the same thing, almost as bad. And then I'll never forget that he got really mad at me because I couldn't play a tune or something. And I was like, well, I don't even know how to strum G, C, and D. Like, this is awful. So I had this really bad experience with, I guess, music theory and scales and all that stuff. And at some point, of course, I got the banjo. And the beautiful thing about the banjo was that I didn't have to learn any of that stuff. I didn't have to worry about modes. So I learned, how to play banjo from immersing myself in the language and by ear, by listening to recordings. And it was only after I had played that stuff for quite some time that I got into the theory and the scales and all that stuff. So I think sometimes where people go wrong with all this stuff is I'm going to learn my scales in all 12 keys, and I'm going to be able to play like Earl Scruggs or something. And, it doesn't have anything to do with the language as far as I'm concerned. So now, like you said, do I sit and think about, if I'm playing Blue Ridge Cabin Home, am I going to think about scales? No. I have an idea of where they're at on the banjo, and they're like little notes that light up. And I say, okay, those are the right notes that I could go to, and they inform maybe my note selection, but I'm certainly not thinking about scales when I play something like that. So there's certainly a part of my training now, when I go to play, say, maybe like a classical thing or maybe a jazz piece, I certainly know where my melodic minor scales are or whatever. But I think that stuff is very secondary on the totem pole of my musical training. And it's something that I would tell someone, learn that after you can play some tunes.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's interesting. I had a little bit of a similar experience, although I went further with the theory before I learned any of the tunes. I think I didn't get off those rails, unfortunately, for a while. So I was all theory for a long time. And what's interesting, it wasn't honestly until I started playing bluegrass that some of that theory actually started to make sense, like really make sense. I mean, it was all theoretical at that point. Can you believe that the music theory was theoretical? But but it was just an idea. It didn't really mean a whole lot to me when I listened to music, unless I looked at something and I could say, oh, well, technically this is of that, and that's whatever, Didn't do me a lot of good. But it wasn't, when you think about, getting into music theory and understanding, how chords move from one place to another, and how there's, this kind of gravitation between chords, and how you can find these chords within the scale of this stuff, that didn't really make sense to me until I heard somebody play something that was 1, 4, 5 over and over and over again. And I just heard 5 going to 1, and then 1 going to 4. And then until I heard that a million times just playing bluegrass, I didn't really get any of it. It didn't really mean anything. Now, of course, I have kind of a way to contextualize that, which is kind of nice, I guess. But I'll be honest, all the theory that I learned before I played bluegrass, very little of it actually helped me play the banjo and play bluegrass. In fact, again, I had to kind of put away a lot of it in order to actually learn how to play bluegrass and the banjo. I mean, that said, learning scales can obviously be productive depending on what it is you want to do. If you want to play quote unquote traditional bluegrass banjo, don't waste your time, basically, I think is my opinion, because you don't have to, if you want to play, if you want to improvise with melodic scales in, a bunch of different keys. Okay. Yeah. There's going to be some productive use there, but it can do other things. It can it can put what you're playing in context a little bit. You can say, okay, well now I understand why this lick works, because if this lick uses this scale, so if I use this scale over this chord, it has this, there's definitely reasons. But I think especially for people who are kind of, maybe there's some responsibility here for myself putting out this information about scales and all this whatever is the actual usefulness of some of this stuff before you're actually playing it. So I appreciate you guys talking about playing the music as being really what drives the learning.
Think about it like language. I mean, all of us learn to speak and talk a lot way sooner than we ever learned what a verb or a noun was. And who even still knows what a past participle is.
Hey, let's keep it family friendly, all right?
But and so it doesn't matter if you can do a sentence diagram. Does that make you an eloquent speaker? I don't think so. So the way we learn to speak is by speaking, not by analyzing how we speak. And so to dive terribly deeply into music theory and all of these things, those things are how we describe the language. Just like we use verbs, nouns, adjectives to describe language, we use Mixolydian, Locrian, whatever to describe certain sounds in music that you don't necessarily. I can make Locrian sounds, and I don't necessarily even need to know what that means.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and I probably made Locrian sounds when I got out of bed this morning.
Right. Well, it's. It kind of reminds me of like roll patterns, for instance. That like roll patterns. Roll patterns probably apply more to what we end up teaching and stuff. Is that it's kind of the same thing where it's in there, it's in the music, and it's something you can practice to the extent that it applies to the thing that you're doing. But again, it's not like Earl Scruggs or whoever said, okay, what are the parts of this language? Let's get this roll and this roll. Okay, now that I have all these roll patterns, let's get some licks. And then, okay, now that I've got these licks, let's play a song. It was the exact opposite, obviously. It's all these ways we describe this thing that's already happened. And you can study it, and that's helpful. But the real music is at the end of the line, is at the beginning of the line where it was recorded by so-and-so. That's the actual content,
I use my bookshelf example. When I was in college, I needed a bookshelf in the dorm. And so I had 2 milk crates and a board, and that was my bookshelf, but it was identifiable as a bookshelf. And you can play Cripple Creek the same way with, 2 milk crates and a board, and you can still build Cripple Creek, but maybe, you could buy some fancier milk crates, or maybe you can buy some nails and a saw, and slowly but surely you add tools to your toolbox, and you're still going to build a bookshelf. But it's not necessarily more of a bookshelf than the milk crate and a board. So so many, and I see students do this all the time, and they really want to know how to play Peaches and Cream. If take an Alan Mundy song, let's take the Peaches and Cream example. If I can play that, then I should be able to play everything that came before that. And you can't reverse engineer this stuff. You got to start.
Really.
You got to start with the 2 milk crates and a board. And
Totally. And this goes along with kind of what you're describing about the way you practice and prioritize things. Also, is it doesn't have to be this overarching like, okay, I got to figure everything out first before I start doing this. It's just, okay, what do I need now? Well, I need a bookshelf. This will work. Let's just do this for now. This will be fine. And then later on, you've got something else in your mind. It's like, okay, well now I'll look into, okay, well, what if I want to make sure this bookshelf doesn't fall over? Can I fasten this on here somehow or something?
Right.
But that doesn't come up until you feel that need where you feel like, okay, this has been good. I'm comfortable here, but maybe I can do a little bit more. And then you follow that thread, and if you do it that way, because if you get out there and you just say, okay, I got to learn all the scales, got to learn all the chords, I got to learn all the fiddle tunes, and then I'll have everything that I need to whatever. you're going to learn a lot of stuff that you don't really care about and isn't going to feel like it was a good use of your time. But if you follow the thread of the thing that you say, okay, I need this, I'll go to the store. You know, I know just to further stretch out this analogy forever, because it's a good one. You know, if you wanted to build a bookshelf and you went to Lowe's or Home Depot and you bought one of every tool they have, you're not going to use a lot of them. You'll never use so many of those tools. And that's not what people really do. If people get into carpentry or building things, they say, okay, well, I got to go back to Home Depot because I need this thing now. And then they've got all the tools they really need and that they use, you know?
I mean, I do that every time I work on something. I'll go and I'll get the tool that I need, or if I don't have something, I'll go buy that tool. And yeah, I mean, the other analogy that I use, you know, growing up and having PBS was the premium channel, was you know, you had Roy Underhill in the woodwright shop and making just things with very primitive tool, and then you had Norm Abrams over here making things, you know, using this biscuit cutter and making things really fancy. And they both are going to build a table, and they're both still a valid table. I mean, you know, I you know, like I said, I can write everything I know on an index card, and I'm pretty happy doing that. And you know, and but also the advantage of that, somebody might say, but Jim, that means you don't know a lot of things. Yeah, but the things I do know, by George, I know them, and I'm super comfortable with those things that I know. I mean, I do them in my sleep. And so it's a manageable amount of ideas and licks that I keep, you know, polished and ready to go, as opposed to having hundreds and hundreds of ideas. You know, I wouldn't.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's great. Well, guys, I think I'm going to release you from the binds of this contracted appearance. You'll
wait. There's not an auto harp section of this interview.
Well, actually, maybe Jim would be willing to play us out at the end of our stream here.
Yeah, as he hits the mute button.
I would never. Hey, do you know Beating Around the Bush on the auto harp? Can you do that?
What a great tune. Let's see. No, I don't know that one.
Well, okay. So before we get out of here, before I hit Jim's mute button real quick, first of all, I want to thank Jody and Jim for coming by. Do you guys have anything, any closing words that you feel like saying, or would you like to advertise on your behalf in any particular way?
No, man, I appreciate y'all just visiting the channel and giving me a chance to teach y'all something. That's such a treat. It's nice to hear positive feedback where you've learned stuff, and I see people sharing posts and tagging me in it and saying, "Hey, I learned this from Jim Pankey." I mean, that's better than, I don't know, that's better than chocolate. I mean, it's good stuff.
That sounds pretty good. What about you, Jody? Any parting words?
No, I just want to say thanks for having me, and I think this is a wonderful thing, because I mean, we all kind of, you know, had our own way of learning, and I think that's good, because, you know, not everybody learns the same way. And it's kind of cool to get everybody's experience all at once here, so everybody listening can hear that and see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, folks, that's going to do it. I think I just want to remind everybody to take a look in the description below, where you can find links to subscribe to Jody and Jim, which you should have done long ago, but you can redeem yourself by doing it now. And if you're interested, you can even subscribe to my YouTube channel. I would enjoy that as well. You can find all three of us as well on patreon.com, which is where you can get all kinds of cool bonus stuff and support us in this interesting time with no gigs and no solid way for performing musicians to perform. And if you have more questions, if your question has not been answered, well, you're in luck, because if you go even further down in the description, you will find a link to the Banjo Discord channel. It's a cool chat room where you can talk to all three of us sometimes even at the same time, we'll contradict each other and ridicule each other and do all sorts of unproductive things. So that's worth checking out as well. Yeah, and beyond that, I hope to do this again sometime, guys. Maybe we'll head over to Jody's channel next time we do this. And yeah, it's been fun. So Jim, feel free to play us out with whatever your favorite tune is.
Thank you all.